Get ready, everyone, and you just might survive. Ruben and Jason are here with their X-Men deep dive. Going through all the X-books is their mission, so get ready for the Learned Edition. Things are getting weird in here. Ruben hopes another sword book gets announced this year. It's the Weird Dose of X, the X-Men comic show. It's the Weird Dose of X, guaranteed. It's the Weird Dose of X, guaranteed not to blow, except your mind. It's the Weird Dose of X, the X-Men comic show. It's the Weird Dose of X, guaranteed not to blow, except your mind.
Welcome, all you weirdos, victims of the psychic bleed, and whoever that is in that one last Krakoan egg. I am your still man-hunting host, Jason. That doesn't sound right. Broadcasting, as always, from the Wrong Turn studio, perched high atop stately Weird Science Tower, and now emerging from a space cocoon to become even more powerful than he was before, it's my pal Ruben. Hey, Ruben, how the heck are you?
Hey, doing good. Getting ready for a big trip to Atlanta. And
Exciting.
I'm hoping that I'm going to have a safe flight. The news has made me a little wary about that, but hopefully this is not my last podcast.
Good luck with all that. Yeah, I'm sure it's fine. Everything will be all right. No problem there. Plus, you're wearing that shiny new costume with stars all over it, so that'll protect you through anything. We've certainly learned that. Today we have a number of books to go through. We have some more X-Man Hunt. We got part 4 of that, which is an X-Men number 13, and part 5, which is an X-Factor number 8. And outside of X-Man Hunt, we also have Phoenix number 9 and Hellverine number 4. But before that, we got a little bit of news. 3 news items today, so actually kind of a lot of news. We've got a new X book, we've got a new not quite X book, and then we get an explanation for something that we thought would be X-related, but as it turns out, actually isn't. So the first one isn't exactly breaking news.
How dare you?
Because the story I'm looking at on Marvel.com is dated February 19th. So I missed it, so it's news to me. This news was an announcement of a new ongoing series called Spider-Man and Wolverine, and their creative team is pretty cool. We got writer Mark Guggenheim and artist Kari Andrews. So this sounds like fun. I did get a little cynical in the Slack chat about this. I get like that sometimes. We do hear that maybe the post-Krakoa X line is underperforming a little bit from a sales point of view. And Ruben, what do you do when the X line underperforms? What's the go-to?
Drag out your Wolverine, right?
Yep, you hit the Wolverine button. Wolverine and Spider-Man, Wolverine and Deadpool, Wolverine and Kitty Pryde, Wolverine and Squirrel Girl, Wolverine and the Inhumans. So, okay, maybe I made those last 2 up, or maybe I'm just predicting next week's announcements. Whether that's a true motivation or not, I have no way of knowing. I also don't know how many issues this alleged ongoing is really going to be. And especially, how many issues do you think this creative team is going to stick on it for? Because Mark Guggenheim is a pretty big name. Kari Andrews is a big name artist. And as far as I can tell, he hasn't been like the ongoing interior artist for a book that he wasn't writing for like 20 years. So kind of surprising to see that he's supposed to be the ongoing artist for this. So that could be fun. What do you think of this book before I drone on?
I'm not familiar with the writing team or the artist, so that doesn't get me excited.
Well, you would recognize him. Guggenheim is probably best known for doing TV. He did all those Arrowverse shows on the CW, and he's also written a bunch of comic books.
Okay. Yeah, I liked the Arrow. The first few seasons was good. And I don't know, I don't love Wolverine, so that doesn't get me excited.
If you've seen the covers for the Rogue Savage Land comics, the covers are Kari Andrews. He has a very distinctive style.
Okay. Yeah, that's not bad art. I'll check it out. Why not, right? But those two do not seem like a natural fit. And I don't know. I don't know what they're going to be doing.
Well, maybe we should have 3 books. We should have Wolverine and Deadpool, Wolverine and Spider-Man, and then Spider-Man and Deadpool, and kind of have them all be like a little interlocking story. That could be fun.
Yeah.
Unlikely, but I like the idea. Anyway, this book, Spider-Man and Wolverine number 1, will be available for purchase on May 21st. Second story is more tangential to X stuff, but possibly more consequential. We finally get some clarity on that Imperial book that Hickman has been teasing for like a year now. Imperial is going to be a 4-issue, quote, event series beginning this June. Written by Hickman, of course, and drawn by Federico Vicentini and Iban Coelho. The mandate of this series is to, quote, shatter and redesign the Marvel cosmos. Marvel also tells us this series will feature groundbreaking developments for Hulks, Black Panthers, Novas, Guardians, and Cosmic Kings.
Yeah. So I like the cosmic stuff, admittedly. I know a lot of people don't, but I'm laughing here because it seems like every year the mandate is to radically redesign the cosmic
Do you remember
universe.
The last book we were told would radically redesign Marvel Cosmic and set the stage for decades to come?
You don't think Adani is doing it?
I don't think Phoenix is really doing that. I mean, that's what Tom Brevoort, conductor of X, said was going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's not what's happening in that book. And I guess plans change. So, Oh well. I'm also curious, hey, I don't know, will Jim and team be covering Imperial on the regular Marvel show? Or is he going to
save that for the X-Men podcast?
So Ruben, be quiet for just 1 second. I'm going to pause here to allow Jim to answer that question when he edits this podcast. Will he be doing this Imperial on the regular show, or is he going to
save that for the X-Men podcast?
Okay, Jim. Now it's your turn, Jim.
I mean, yeah, it's Hickman and Cosmic. I'm excited. I will definitely check that one out.
Oh, for sure. We're definitely going to read that. And the thing is, he had a big job kind of like this for Gods, right? Gods was supposed to redefine the whole magic background of the Marvel universe, and we like those stories a lot. We like the characters. We like the way he tells his tales, but it doesn't seem to have really stuck, right? I don't see any other books spinning out of what he did from Gods. So let's hope it takes a little better here with Imperial. All right. Third and final news item comes from the pages of Amazing Spider-Man. Now, Ruben, do you remember that cover we talked about a few issues back? The one that made us think that Juggernaut was going to dress up as Spider-Man and take over as the web slinger?
Mm-hmm.
Well, have you happened to read this week's Amazing Spider-Man number 69, dude?
No, I just wait for you to tell me.
Hey, you didn't listen to the Marvel podcast either. Shame on you. I'm sure you can listen to that on your plane trip today. So Spidey has been dead for a few issues now. It happens. In this issue, he's brought back to life, and he's also empowered by Cyttorak. So the image that we saw was
it wasn't Juggernaut,
is the other way around, right? Yeah. It wasn't Juggernaut as Spidey, it was Spidey given the powers of a Juggernaut. So it seems like we don't need to worry about Kane leaving the X-Men team to go web swinging through Manhattan. Well, those new books will wait for us in the near future, but right now it's time to talk about this week's chapter of the Astonishing X-Men Infinity comic. It is Astonishing X-Men number 14, Controlled Demolition Part 2. Written by Alex Packnadel, art by Philip Sevi, colors by Michael Bartolo, and letters by Clayton Cowles. Now, Ruben, I'm given to understand that you did not have a chance to read this chapter today with all your packing and whatnot. That's correct?
Yeah, unfortunately not. I've been skimming it as we've been doing news, but I have not.
You're not hanging on my every word? My goodness.
How dare you?
So I'll just tell you about it. Feel free to chime in and ask questions. So now Ruben, are you sitting down right now? I don't want to blow your mind or anything, but it seems that in this fictional universe, mutants are sometimes both hated and feared. Crazy, I know. So once again, we have a Chicago story and we have an Ireland story. And those two stories so far, not at all connected. I'm sure they'll come together eventually. So starting in Chicago, we learned last chapter that ex-Krakoan mutants have entered the Chicago construction business, pushing some regular human workers out of their jobs. Now we see that one of those mutants, the one called Skin, a.k.a. Angelo, he's even getting his pay cut because the head office says they have to trim the fat. Now, Skin here is getting paid via just an envelope of cash. Is that how things are done in Chicago? I don't think I've ever been paid just by here's some cash in an envelope. I don't know. Maybe Angelo.
He's an off the books worker. I'm guessing is what they're saying.
He doesn't have his Krakoan green card or however that works. Who knows how immigration works from Krakoans? But anyway, if his abilities make him so uniquely useful as a construction worker, shouldn't he have some market power and be able to say, "Hey, no, pay me more, or I'll go work for the company next door"? I don't know. Maybe if he's undocumented in some sense, maybe he doesn't have that ability.
Yeah. I know people don't like the blending of modern and, or like, real world issues with comics, but frankly, that would be an interesting topic, right? Like all these people left, they joined a declared independent nation, right?
Right.
And that imploded. They're now trying to get back into the U.S. Are they really, permitted to be there? I know maybe they originated from there, but
of
I could
course,
certainly
it's something that could be done well or really poorly, right? We wouldn't want, like sometimes it always feels like characters just turning towards a camera and saying, by the way, reader, this writer has the correct political opinions. That's boring. But if you actually make it a story and you show how it's complicated and people are trying to do their best in different ways, that could be a really good story. So I'm happy to see this kind of texture being put into the X universe. So Angelo, he doesn't ask for more money. He just kind of sighs and puts up with it. And when he leaves the construction trailer, he's met by 3 of the local yahoos who have lost their jobs. They've been drinking and they have a baseball bat. Not a great combination. It seems the plan was just to scare Angelo, but things get out of hand, and Angelo gets smacked in the face with the bat. And Angelo resists and pretty much justifiably beats the stuffing out of those yahoos. Now, one of those yahoos was Nick, the guy we met at the start of the previous chapter. And afterwards, we see him back at his really dirty apartment, logging on to the Flat Scanners website and looking to get more involved with that movement. So we got the Flat Scanners coming in again. So again, all basically fine, but aside from the kind of economic point, very, very standard stuff we've seen a million times before. Now let's pop a few thousand miles away to the Emerald Isle. The Emerald Isle. I tried to get fancy there. I should just say Ireland. We're going to Ireland, Ruben. Specifically Cassidy Keep. We join events already in progress. That rotten, old, non-functional Krakoan gate is on fire. We're told that the cause is arson. Somebody did this on purpose. Paige, Husk, she's very upset about this and wants to try to save the gate for sentimental reasons, but Banshee tells her no use, it's gone. Afterwards, Banshee heads to the pub looking for answers, but no one there wants to talk. They all claim that they were, quote, watching the GAA, which I think must mean the Gaelic Athletic Association, which the internet tells me does sports like hurling, which I don't think means throwing up after you go to the pub. I think it's a different thing. I don't think they put that on TV. Hurling, Gaelic football, handball, and rounders. Fine Irish sports, I'm sure. Banshee doesn't appreciate his former friends being so unhelpful to him, and so he uses his Banshee powers to shatter all their drinks. And Ruben, those drinks are expensive.
Yeah.
That pint of Smithwick's that the one guy ordered cost him £5.65, which in real money, the internet tells me translates to more than $7. Wow. So Banshee here did some real economic damage. Like $150 worth of beer he just spilled all over the floor. On the way out, he shatters the bar's windows too, but I think those are pretty cheap compared to the beers. And we end on a scene of Paige back at Cassidy Keep. She's frustrated and ashamed of who she is, but conveniently, she's Husk, so she doesn't have to be who she is. She peels off her face, and now she looks just like a person whose picture she has, somebody whose name is C.C. Werblowski, who is a celebrity influencer and appears to be a newly invented character. So, well, Ruben, I thought this chapter was a little bit down. Get the hated and feared, the feared and the hated, in Chicago, in Ireland. Give me something new.
Yeah.
Banshee ruining happy hour at the pub. That was the best scene. I like the way the artist, Philip Sevy, drew the glasses shattering, right? It was almost like those Little Billy comics in Family Circus in the Sunday paper, where you could kind of follow the path of destruction as it goes from glass to glass to glass. It looked pretty neat. I do hope that this turns out to be set up for something more interesting than, Paige gets picked on everywhere she goes, and Human, who doesn't like mutants, joins the Flat Scanners. I want it to be more. How about you, Ruben? What are you looking for from this book?
Just a good time. I don't know. It's hard for me to say what I want in a book. I just kind of take what they give me and then react. Do I like it or not? Mm-hmm. So
yeah, this is all right. But again, it feels very much like a middle chapter that doesn't do a whole lot. If we haven't seen this in all the other books, maybe this would be fine. I'm just tired of books and issues and chapters being, people hate and fear the mutants even more this time. It's boring. Yeah. It's dull. Give me something more creative.
Yeah.
So
I guess the question, well, let me think about this a little more. So I think the answer I would say is what I really care about is there lasting character growth and development. And when you just kind of tread a standard beat, you don't really get that.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it's the fifth time we've seen the exact same situation and people reacting to it, it's kind of like meh.
Yeah, like Paige at the end of the last time we saw her in one of these arcs, she was, fighting back and strong and, defiant against, the humans who hated and fear. And now she's just kind of, collapsing again. It's going in a circle. Now, before we go, I do want to mention that there's an interview with both Alex Pactadell and Tim Seeley. So both of our current Astonishing X-Men writers are released just today as we record on the Aped X-Men Monday. Nothing too groundbreaking in the interview. I just kind of scanned through it real quick. But they do talk about how they see the Infinity Comics as a place to tell smaller scope, more character-based stories. So that at least is what they're going for. Worth reading if you're following this series. It's, again, the Adventures in Poor Taste website, their X-Men Monday series interview out today, which is Monday the 17th. Okay, that is the Infinity comic. Now on to the actual grown-up comics, X-Men number 13. So it's time to turn back to the X-Man hunt. And frankly, Ruben, not to be negative, but I think this event's kind of falling apart. Each individual story is, some are more okay, some are less okay, but there's no cohesion to it. I wonder what happened to that old fabled X-Slack from the Krakoan days when we were told the writers would all hang out all day and swap ideas and keep everyone up to date on their plots, because that doesn't seem to happen here. Tom Brevoort is labeled as the conductor of X in all these books, and I guess it's on his head to make this work, right? Because I don't know if he needs to take a firmer hand and say, hey, here's the story, but these books do not feel like they are happening in sequence in the same universe. Am I off base here, or do you think that kind of checks out?
This event, I think I'm a little more favorable of it than you are, but the writer to writer change in sort of somewhat seemingly key details is very jarring. So it kind of annoys me because I kind of like the big picture of what's going on. And we get some interesting explanations in this one about why people are worried about Xavier. And I'm like, I'm not sure why this wasn't just clarified at the start.
For sure.
This would have made it a lot more of a gray area. Do you support Xavier or stop him? And then when it swings into X Factor again, the tone just changes dramatically.
Yeah, and I'd be okay if it was like a Rashomon kind of thing where we know it's different characters having their own point of views and beliefs about what's happening, but it doesn't seem like that. It just seems like nobody knew what the next issue or last issue was going to say.
Yeah.
So last week was mostly about Charles as essentially the protagonist, right? He was the one who saw bad things happening to his space daughter. He's the one who busted out of the prison. He's the one who manipulated Anole and Miss Marvel and Storm into doing his bidding. This week, he falls kind of in the background. He's more things done to him than him doing things, especially at X Factor, which we'll get to next. Mm-hmm. But first, we do have X-Men number 13, X-Manhunt Chapter 4, Gods and Monsters. Written by Jed McKay, pencils by Netho Diaz, inks by Sean Parsons, and colors by Fer Cifuentes Sujo. Now, as we expected, this story picks up right where Storm number 6 left off. Storm and Xavier are aboard the Storm Sanctuary in flying saucer mode. The X-Men portaled in to stop them and get Xavier, and instead of acting like rational adult human beings or rational adult mutants and having a rational conversation over a cup of tea, instead they went right into fighting. Storm iced up Scott's face pretty good, putting him out of commission for basically this whole issue. The X-Men took Scott, portaled back out of the flying saucer, onto the abandoned mutant island of Utopia. We suspected, that's got to be there for a reason, and we do find out what that is today. They left Juggernaut behind, and also, secretly, another X-Man, Hank McCoy, the Beast. Hank was left to snoop around the saucer. He found his way to the engine room, learning that the saucer appears to be powered by one of those dead alien kaiju as seen in Storm number 1. Now, notably, when the X-Men arrived in Storm number 6, Scott went on about how, we're here to get Xavier because he's manipulative, he's a user, he's not to be trusted, he belongs in prison, all that kind of stuff, which is true enough, but that is what the professor is doing. But in this issue, we don't hear about that anymore. Now, Ruben, as you alluded, why in this issue do Scott and the X-Men say, hey, we got to get Xavier out of here?
Yeah, they're saying that his tumor is causing him to have psychic bleed, which then, I guess, is fritzing out everyone in San Francisco. and that we have a problem because the saucer is near civilians.
Yeah, they use the term psychic bleed and also Omega's psychic contagion, and they say he's affecting the whole Bay Area. And it would be nice to get, one cutaway page of what that means, because we don't see any of it.
Yeah.
And also we're told that the X-Men who are here have been given like a psychic cootie shot against the contagion by Kid Omega. So we don't get to see it happen to any of our current characters. So, yeah, I mean,
I wish they had done the red triangle.
That'd be great too, right?
They're trying to simplify some of this, right? By getting rid of some of the ideas.
A lot of this might be, some of the dialogue feels like it was changed at the end to try to make the continuity kind of work. Yeah. Like they can sneak things in words that aren't shown on panel.
Yeah.
Because if this contagion is such a big deal, it went unmentioned in Storm. It had no effect at all in NYX, where he was in Manhattan. He was in New York City, Ruben. Millions of people all around him. If he's actually having this issue.
Yeah.
And I guess there is some continuity with Uncanny, right? Because we saw that the Grey Malkin prison guards were having a problem, and that must be what this is too. But last week, it was just completely ignored.
Yeah.
So this issue,
I think NYX really needed. I wasn't following that was what was going on, right? Like, we knew some weird stuff was happening, but I actually thought that was like a second story. That was like, we'll pick this back up later. Yeah, in Uncanny.
Yeah, we talked about that. We discussed, was it Xavier? I think you said it was Xavier. I thought it might not even be him. I thought it might be, something separate. It might be that other secret prisoner. Was it, what do they call? Prisoner number
Prisoner
one?
X.
I forget what the other call. The other
Prisoner
one of that
X.
avian, Prisoner X, we'll get back to eventually. But now we know it must be Xavier, but we don't really... Yeah, just give me a scene, one panel showing what's going on in San Francisco. And Ruben, not for nothing, but if people are starting to go a little loopy in San Francisco, how could you even tell? Just a question for our West Coast listeners. Okay, so this issue...
Don't do that. Don't do that. But what I would say is, back to the whole point about, mutants being dangerous. They just dealt with the psychic space aliens, right? That was probably like last week, where some damn mutant had them like hallucinating a space alien invasion. And
Ben Liu, I think his name was,
Yeah, and now more shit's happening, right? Like the whole West Coast is...
And you wonder why people aren't so crazy about mutants,
Yeah.
Okay, so that's that complaint. The issue itself is basically two fight scenes. We have a psychic battle between Xavier and Kid Omega, and a simultaneous physical battle between an eternity-powered Storm and the rest of the X-Men.
Yeah.
So let's start with these psychic...
I really like these parts. I'm going to say this. I know you might be really negative, but this is doing a lot of stuff that I enjoy, and it's tying in like past continuity in ways that I'm like, okay, you did it, McKay. Good job. Okay. But
the fights are fine. They're drawn really, really well. I can't take away anything from the art. Netho Diaz is killing it on this.
Yeah, but it's jarring in relation to the rest of the event. I'll agree with that. Maybe less so with Storm. I feel like Storm was more faithfully in line with this, but just the tone. I feel this would have been such a better event if just two people wrote it.
Yeah, I don't think it needs as many issues as it's getting. And every issue is padded out with extended fight scenes, and I know I get it. It's superhero comics. We need fight scenes, but it does feel like 2 pages of story, 18 pages of padding, rinse and repeat next issue. But if there are bits of continuity connections that I missed, definitely let me know as we get to
Sure. Yep.
So let's see. We got the psychic battle at the end.
Can I say one more thing really quick? This whole like psychic bleed thing, it also really made me think of what was going on with Magneto.
Okay.
And his like Fritz out powers.
Resurrection disease, whatever we call it.
Yeah. So I kind of wish they had maybe just picked one, right? That everybody had the same problem.
Right.
Because we already saw like he can't control his powers, right? He was like, oh, I've still got my powers. They're just out of control. And so it kind of seems what is going on here with Charles too, right?
It's pretty similar, yeah, because, Xavier has been resurrected a bunch of times too. So it certainly could be one thing. And, it's one of those Occam's razor things where it's better to have one explanation than just separate explanations for similar seeming things all over the place. Yeah, that could be an interesting idea. So here we got the psychic fight between Kid Omega and Xavier. Because at the end of last issue of Storm, Beast had found the engine room, and then Xavier found Beast, puts Beast into some sort of a trance, catatonic state, whatever. So in this issue, Quentin beams back onto the saucer, into that engine room, And now we get the brain fight between the two brain boys, Charles and Quentin.
Yeah.
Now, Ruben, they talk about this being Omega versus Omega, but hadn't it been kind of established during Krakoa that Charles is not actually Omega level psychic? I thought it was in black and white, even on one of those data pages, that he was not actually
he wasn't
Omega.
on any of those lists. Yeah. Well, maybe it's just Charles overvaluing his capabilities, or
I'll buy that. That's the best explanation I've heard. Is he thinks he's the best.
Yeah.
I do love the change in art style here, right? The Of the Mind sequences look terrific. This distinctive kind of cool blue and purple color scheme, a much sketchier feel to them, works terrific. Charles projects.
I like this idea too of this is one of the things where I said, okay, this is pretty cool. We know what Omega means, right? Which is like there's no upward limit to your mutant ability.
Right.
But I appreciate that doesn't mean like you're literally just, at odds with, or, in a standstill. And so I really dug this idea of like Charles saying, experience between two Omegas is going to be the deciding factor. It's not just that you just can't, do anything.
He says he's going to win because he's basically more experienced and sneakier than Kid Omega.
Yep.
So we get this, I think, again, continuity of seeing Quentin back in a version of his school days at, I forget what the school was called at the time, but now all his fellow students all look like Charles. The professor looks like Charles, and he's just being attacked by multiple Xaviers, and he gets tied to a giant wooden X outside the mansion. He's looking just like the cover of Uncanny 251, the one that shows Logan strapped to that X.
And I love the visual too. It's like, I don't know why this really creeps me out.
It is
like,
one of those go-tos.
Totally a dream I could be having with, you're in class and, all the students turn around and they're like the same person. It's freaky as hell.
I think the X almost crucifying look, they kind of go to that well a lot in X-Men. It's one of those things that when they need a creepy visual, they'll go to these strapping people to X's, but it does work, so I can't blame them too much.
Yeah.
So it seems here like Quentin is outclassed by the professor's superior sneakiness, but he has an ace up his sleeve.
Yeah.
Back in X-Men number 5 of this series, that was the one with the silent sequence of Quentin and Psylocke going into mutant Ben Liu's mind. Quentin, when he was there, he triggered a trap, which was a thought form of Xavier's sister, Cassandra Nova. And we learn now that Quentin secretly kind of held on to a piece of that trap, deploys it now. So Cassandra here does that thing where she puts her hand through the back of Xavier's skull, which is a visual right out of the recent Deadpool Wolverine movie. So I bet that's where that's referenced to. Also makes Xavier think he's covered in bugs. Now, naturally, that freaks him to freak out. He rips off a Cerebro helmet. With the helmet off, Charles distracted. Beast comes out of the trance, slaps Magneto's helmet on charge as I whap my microphone because I talk with my hands. He jabs Charles with a sedative. So for the second week in a row, Charles gets sedated without his consent. Also, there's that fight over. He's just getting he's getting sedated all over the place, and he don't want to.
Yeah, I like this whole fight. It works really well for me. We know Magneto's helmet is like the anti-psychic helmet, and we get to see Magic do the cool like appear and
that was
just
fun.
grab it and jump through.
Yeah, she quickly portals back to the base in Alaska. It confuses Magneto by just whipping his helmet off and leaves without explaining anything. That was good. I like that bit.
Yeah, that she snaps Beast out of
fight.
his like psychic kind of stupor by putting the helmet on him, and then later he can take the helmet off and put it on Xavier.
Yeah, a clever enough fight. I mean, and McKay's done some pretty good psychic fights. Was he the one who did the one between Xavier and Scurvy, or was that an Uncanny? They wrote that together, but that was another pretty good psychic fight. The one where they were giant, like knock 'em sock 'em robot types.
Yeah, and psychic fights are usually pretty terrible, but these ones are cool. I like the way they've been doing them, and I like the idea of containing like an essence of like it's not real Cassandra Nova, right? It's just like she had left this mind trap and
part of her brainwaves or whatever.
Yeah, but certainly Xavier's got like a little bit of fear towards Cassandra Nova, so. I could see him being a little weakened and less focused in any sort of conflict with her. I don't play those card games like the Pokemans or anything, but this is going to be one of those attacks that's especially effective against Charles, right? Against Charles Xavier,
it's super effective.
Yeah.
And it's only a callback to a few issues. You go, oh, yeah, I remember that. I like that kind of thing. So good work on there. Ready to move on to the next fight?
Sure.
Yep. So this is going on at the same time. Storm, who's currently being possessed by Eternity, continues to beat the stuffing out of Juggernaut. Juggernaut's really, kind of having a moment. He's in this book. He's an Amazing Spider-Man. He had that run in the Infinity comic. And really, mostly what he does in a lot of these books is just take a beating over and over and over and not give up. He's really good at.
Yeah.
In this issue, he talks about how this beating from Storm is nothing compared to the ones his dad used to give him. So that's kind of dark. Juggy does get in one good line. I love this line. He says, "I always said, if blunt force trauma ain't working for you, you ain't using enough of it." Now, that's that could be Ben Grimm, too. That sounds like the Thing also to me.
Yeah.
Give him a little Brooklyn accent, but it's a good line.
Yeah, it's definitely good line.
Not necessarily good, like, life advice for all you listeners out there, but, in context for Juggernaut. Absolutely.
Yeah, he's a bruiser, right?
Everything looks like a hammer.
You could totally see him buying that.
For sure. Now, Storm is eventually defeated by Psylocke being sneaky, right? Juggernaut kind of keeps her busy for a while, but Psylocke wins the day by threatening to murder Maggot to death. Maggot had been badly injured by Juggernaut last issue, ripped his arm off, if I recall correctly. And then he was made into the Omega Maggot by Eternity. And we laughed about Omega Maggot. In between issues, I guess, he's made himself a cocoon to hang out in. Because we didn't see that happen, but he's in a cocoon now. Mm-hmm. And Psylocke threatens to stab him through the cocoon. Not with her psychic blade, but with a regular pointy metal one. Eternity couldn't care less about this, but Storm does. And just like Storm didn't let Eternity murder Dr. Doom to death in Storm number whatever that was, Ororo doesn't let Eternity allow Psylocke to murder her pal Maggot. So Storm wakes back up, and then for kind of hand-wavy reasons, now she's okay with the X-Men taking the sedated Professor X away with them, which is all the fight was about anyway. So I don't know exactly why she gives up here, but oh well. So that's 2 fights done, and we got to wrap up the issue.
I want to bitch, though. I want to bitch about the sword.
The sword. Tell me about the sword.
Everyone's favorite trope. Now the whole thing is a full sword with like the psychic powers around it, right? We do see a scene when she's like holding the sword against the cocoon, but the psychic, power is like charging up over it. But we've also seen the damn thing like a lightsaber, right? Where it's just the hilt.
Yeah, I think
like the X.
I guess those are different swords. Like she can have a fully psychic blade that's made out of nothing. Mm-hmm. Or, I don't think it was necessary to put the psychic purple fire around this blade. Let it be just a regular.
I wish they had it because it makes it seem like the thing, like it can be the whatever sword, right? Sometimes it's got a blade. Sometimes it's got a psychic blade. Sometimes it's got a blade with psychic blade over it. Like, pick one. I need consistency in like what this damn weapon does, and
let her
continues
have
to drive me insane.
Another regular metal sword to do things you'd want a metal sword to do, right? She's a ninja. Yes. She learned how to use a katana or whatever. So
I don't have any issue with her holding a katana. It's just we've seen the thing without the blade, right? When the psychic powers are gone, and now we see it together.
Let them be a little more separate. Good point. So the X-Men take Xavier. They portal their way back down to join Scott where they left him on Utopia. And now Psylocke explains something we didn't see happen on panel, which once again I'm thinking, was this created late in the game when they had to fix things up? They don't want to change the art, so they kind of squeezed in more words here. And there are a lot of words in these balloons. She says to Scott that they had to compromise with Storm. The quote is, "We had to promise Storm not to return Charles to Greymalkin. With her resistance to telepathic attack, she was unaware of his psychic bleed." Now, Storm has been shown to be resistant to telepathy and stuff like that before. That kind of checks out. But weird that we get this through Psylocke and not shown on panel. So it seems like Charles's big day out is over. But then in the final panel, X-Factor appears, and their leader, Angel, says, "We'll take it from here." So, Ruben, you seem more positive about this, so tell me what you thought of this issue overall.
I liked it. I thought the fights were intriguing. I could follow the action. There were some good quippy one-liners. I appreciated the callbacks to, recent continuity with, there's a point where Magneto is talking to Ben Liu and a few others about like how they should be joining the fight. And, Magneto says no and, mentions that San Francisco's already been screwed over by Ben Liu. So I was like, okay, that's a nice little callback to that prior issue. And then we saw Cassandra Nova brought back, or at least the psychic form of her.
Right.
Which, again, I appreciated. So, and then even just tying in, we see Storm in her possession, and this is like kind of the regular X-Men kind of realizing there's something not right with her, which is, it's now on their radar, which I appreciate. So I really liked it. I'm going to go surprisingly high. I'm going to give it an 8.
Okay.
And if it was just this and Uncanny, I probably would think this is a really cool event. But I guess maybe this Storm was pretty good too. Maybe that Storm and then those 3 would be a solid event. But fortunately, we have NYX and a bunch of other stuff.
You get that inconsistency about the psychic bleed. I guess if you want to say Storm has the resistance or she didn't notice, I think she would, Maggot would be affected. Maybe she'd notice that people on the ground are freaking out. I don't know. Would the Hippos be affected? Who knows?
It has to be the resist thing because, and I buy it, right? Like he taught all the X-Men, as we learned at the end of the Krakoa era. If you went through the Xavier School, you learned how to resist like basic psychic stuff.
But they do go out of their way to say that Quentin gave the X-Men here a particular like inoculation against this particular bleed. So it's not just the regular resist.
Yeah.
So Ruben, I agree with a lot of those things. I'm glad you brought up those links to continuity. That is good stuff. I guess I'm viewing it more as an issue or an entry in this X-Manhunt story rather than just an issue of X-Men. And that's when the continuity things really put me off.
Yeah.
The psychic bleed thing, I think it's a perfectly fine idea, but it should have been consistent through the story. And the reason that Storm would say, okay, you can have Xavier, I want to understand that a little bit better.
They make it sound like everyone is like freaking out in San Francisco.
Show me
we
something.
Didn't see that at Grey Malkin, right? It was like just a handful of people. So again, it seems sort of even inconsistent with what we learned.
Very convenient. It matters when the writer wants it to matter, and it doesn't matter when the writer doesn't care. And that's not playing fair. Again, fantastic art. Netho Diaz stuff looks amazing. The real world stuff looks great. The Of the Mind stuff looks great and looks different enough so that you can tell it's of the mind. So terrific there. And also, credit to colorist. Where's the person's name? Yeah, Fer Cifuentes Suho to keep those worlds looking different. Looks great. They're perfectly fine fights, Ruben, but at the end of the day, they're just a couple of fights. And the actual plot stuff wasn't so great. I'm going to raise my score a little bit. I'll go from a 7 to a 7.3 out of 10. It was all right. If you like some good X-Men fights, some X-Men fighting some other X-Men, you get to have that here. Okay, anything else to add about X-Men number 13? All right, moving on to our other X-Manhunt book today, which is X-Factor number 8, which is the antepenultimate issue of this series. Also, Legacy number 300. Not much of a celebration here for issue 300. Just a cover gallery at the end of covers you could have Googled yourself anyway if you're really curious. Marvel did not charge any extra for this issue, still $3.99 like all the other books, so hey, free cover gallery. Ruben, do you think there should have been more of a fanfare for a number 300 issue?
No.
No, okay. Why not?
I hate those like celebration issues because they don't tell anything meaningful, right? Like what you get is like a victory lap, story that
maybe you bring in an old creative team to kind of tell a short story, one of those things.
Yeah. And honestly, when you get to like 300, I feel like you probably already did the victory lap at 100 and maybe 200. So, I mean, we've got annuals. Like, we don't need more just stories that don't
fair enough.
accomplish anything.
And X Factor as a title, it's not like there's one continuous team or story that explains what X Factor is, right? It's just kind of a catch-all name for any team book that they don't want to call X-Men or X-Force.
Yeah, it's like we've got Uncanny and X-Men going. We need to roll out, something else that, will get people to pay for it. So slap the X Factor on it. It's been even like Krakoa era, right? Like they were like investigators.
That was
originally
a weird
they
run.
were like, the original X-Men.
The original 5
graduated.
pretending to be other people.
Yeah. So, and then for a while they were like government operatives. The government employed mutants. The series is like no central, unifying theme. There are certainly people that you would expect to show up in an X Factor, like Polaris, and Havoc, but
and any other title could be given to this team, but they just use X Factor because it's a title people recognize from back in the day and are more likely to buy it than if you give it some brand new name.
Mm-hmm.
But this is X-Manhunt Chapter 5, The Summers of Days Past, written by, of course, Mark Russell, art by Bob Quinn, colors by Jesus Abertov, letters by Joe Caramagna. And you know who I feel kind of bad for, Ruben? Artist Bob Quinn. because he has to follow what Netho Diaz did in X-Men number 13, picking up right afterwards with the same characters in the same location, making it just impossible not to kind of directly compare the two versions. And while this art, the Bob Quinn art, isn't bad, it's perfectly okay for a humor-focused book that's in the line of like a JLI, one of those kind of things. It doesn't hold a candle to what we just saw, right? Netho Diaz's stuff, it just looks more detailed, more three-dimensional, more action-packed. Quinn's work is just more simple, more cartoony, works for what it's trying to be, but that comparison is tough.
Yeah.
And we don't get a whole lot of jokes this issue. Did you recognize what we don't get at all in this issue? What is left out of this issue of X Factor that we've seen in, I think, every issue of X Factor?
No corn dog.
No corn dogs. Not a single corn dog or corn dog reference.
Yeah, suddenly we know why Nils likes it.
I think
the Slack was like, oh, it seems like it's getting better.
I can only guess that Mark Russell may have lost his sponsorship from the National Corn Dog Institute.
Yes.
Because none of them here.
Yeah. Well, on that grounds, I would say this is a 100% better issue.
We'll give it a little bonus point for lack of corn dog.
Yes.
So once again, this issue is mostly fight scenes. Professor X not involved this time. He spends most of the issue unconscious. Instead, we get a group fight of X-Men versus X-Factor, and then a brother versus brother battle between Scott and Alex. And then at the very end, a little bit of actual plot occurs.
Yeah.
So, team fight. Angel says that he and X-Factor have been hired by the U.S. government to bring Charles back to Greymalkin. Now, how this ties in with One World Under Doom? Does the U.S. government still exist? I don't know, but this book doesn't care about
Doom
that.
didn't put any of the governments out. He just said that he's above all of them.
I guess so.
Persist.
Fair enough.
But what I took issue with was this idea that Greymalkin was a federal prison. That really rubbed me the wrong way.
That goes back and forth,
because they very clearly have said repeatedly that this is a private prison and the government is just looking the other way and tolerating its existence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe they've I guess we have private prisons in the US, right? Maybe for limited circumstances they'll send people to Greymalkin. But they're not a federal prison unless that's changed, right? The government is not running it, and Karina Ellis is not like part of the government.
That definitely has not been consistent, the wrong way. For sure. Let's see. So, why do the X-Men refuse to allow Charles to go back to Greymalkin? Because that's the basis of this fight. The X-Men already say, oh, Charles needs to go to prison. X-Factor says he needs to go to this specific prison, and they fight over this. Is it because they don't want to break their promise to Storm? That never comes up. Instead, we have Magic who says, quote, we are not returning him to that mutant-hating death trap. That doesn't sound like Magic. Well, this seems like they shouldn't really have a fight here. They seem to be on the same side, except we got to have a fight. So we have a fight. And aside from Angel, X-Factor is totally outclassed here, which only makes sense. I'll give credit to Mark Russell for not writing his team as being on the same level as the actual X-Men. Zyber gets taken out right away by Juggernaut. Pyro gets his hands frozen by Temper. And Beast points out that Granny Smite is totally useless just so long as everyone ignores her. Which, Beast a smart guy, point to Beast.
Yeah, and I laughed at that. I was like,
that's all right.
That's a good joke. That's a good joke, Mark Russell.
So all of the X-Factor offense has to come from Angel.
Yeah.
We knew that Angel had been in the hospital for a while after being injured in X-Factor number 1, and it turns out that while he was in the shop, he had some elective surgery done too. And this surgery, we are told, basically restored his Archangel abilities. And my question for you, Ruben, is, when did he lose his Archangel abilities?
Exactly. That was my other beef with this.
Because we saw him use those abilities in Heir of Apocalypse not so long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, this is Mark Russell continuity, which is different from the rest of the continuity, except by putting it in as part of this event, they're trying to make the two continuities work, and they just don't. But we got what we got. I'm very curious if going forward, after this book is over, Angel's going to pop up somewhere else. Is anyone going to reference this elective surgery version of Archangel? Probably not.
Doing the Angel Ball?
Yeah, because he's super powerful now. He's got a sword, and he can roll up like an armadillo, but pointier, and he chases Beast around. Very silly version of Archangel.
Yeah, well, I always liked Archangel as a character. I thought he was pretty cool. Maybe it's my 90s extreme love. So I'm okay with this like maneuver, but I think the art needs to be better. I don't like the way it's drawn.
Yeah, it's a comedy book.
Yeah, maybe it's Archangel with the hair that's really bugging me because we don't normally see that, right? Like usually
Let me find it.
As Archangel, he's got his head covered.
It does look a little goofy. So while all this fighting is happening, Psylocke notices that the prize they're fighting over, that unconscious body of Professor X, it's up and gone. And that's because it was taken away by Havoc and Frenzy. They're no longer on the team, but Frenzy had been psychically contacted by Professor X a day or two ago. Now, how could Professor X possibly have known that he would need Frenzy's help in particular? I have no answer to that. It seems totally random. Of all the mutants and all the gin joints in all the world, or however that saying goes, how would he know, oh, Frenzy, that's the one I'm going to need to rescue me when I'm unconscious on Utopia? That's a story we're being told. Doesn't make any sense, but that's where we are. Yeah. And I don't really know why she would be particularly well disposed towards Charles Xavier, right? I don't think they had a great history, particularly where it should say, oh, he's my father figure, I need to rescue him, anything like that. It's just, this is the character Mark Russell had available, not on the team. This is the character that Charles had to contact.
Yeah.
So they run off with Charles, but are met by Cyclops, who had not been part of that first fight.
All of this would be better solved by Red Triangle Protocol being very clearly articulated in the X offices. Because he could have just said, like, Frenzy never learned it, right? And then you could just say, oh, she's under the influence of Charles.
Sure, that'd work. Or make the psychic bleed part of it, right? Again, have it some continuity there. One reason why it might be her. Now, Scott, they did teleport to not quite next to Scott on purpose. At the end of X-Men, Psylocke says, oh, we teleported a little ways down the beach so as not to land on you, which is weird because every other time they teleport right next to wherever they need to go. But in this one case, on a wide open beach, they got to have a safety margin.
Yeah.
But because they had to have Scott not part of the first fight. Also, Scott looks completely fine in the art. We're told that he was all this horrible damage done by the freezing.
Face. Yeah.
Even in the dialogue, Alex says, oh yeah, it still sort of looks like your head's frozen. But nobody told artist Bob Quinn that it was supposed to look any different than regular old Scott. I would love to see the page of dialogue or script he had to draw from, because I'm willing to bet money it said nothing about Scott's face being messed up.
Yeah.
Oh, well. So during this fight, and it's supposed to be an emotional fight here, right? Mark Russell does three things. He does like jokes, he does social commentary, and then he likes to hard transition to deep emotional character stuff. And that shift to emotional character stuff never really works for me. It always feels artificial. And here, it should be a really deeply emotional moment. These two brothers who have all this history, in the Krakoan era and before, it should be a big deal, but it doesn't feel deep and emotional to me. Am I just being cynical and have a black shriveled heart, or was this not all it was cracked up to be?
No, I kind of rolled my eyes about this. I was like, come on, Scott's got to be better than this in dealing with Alex. And I always think about, they always try to make Alex out to be like the screw off, son or brother, I guess, of like the Summers. What's he actually done? He seems to be just doing regular stuff, right? Like the last thing before he joined X Factor wasn't he part of Hellions?
Well, wasn't he partially dead there in X-Men?
Oh yeah,
Dark
I guess
for
he
a
was.
while?
Yeah, I guess he was working with Madeline.
Yeah, he had that Madeline interlude again.
But again, like, what was he doing that was bad? Like, he was the one that was trying to keep her kind of in line, and I just don't get where everyone's like always pissed off at him. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and again, it's because they fight here because they have to fight, even though they kind of want the same thing. They want Charles back in prison somewhere.
Yeah.
Now, that's not going to happen because that can't happen for the story to happen. During the fight, Charles wakes up. He crawls to a panel somewhere on the beach, triggers it with his palm, which causes a golden Krakoan egg to appear. I guess it rises out of the beach or something. It's not very clear. And this is what Charles was after all along. First, he wanted the Cerebro helmet. Maybe, we don't know, maybe he needed the Cerebro helmet to trigger the egg. Maybe he needs it for something else. Now he has the egg. he did tell Storm, quote, "I want to raise the dead one final time." So that checks out. Weird that Storm wouldn't put up a fight based on, like, if she wants someone raised from the dead, she didn't mention that when they let him take Charles.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wonder why he bothered to stick around on Storm's UFO to fight the X-Men, right? Because he was already where he needed to be. He could have just gone down to Utopia, which was right below him, and skipped out on that whole nonsense.
You know what? When I read this line where Xavier is saying, "Scott, I know that you've given up on Hope, but Hope hasn't given up on you."
Being capital H Hope?
Yes. I was like, oh my fucking God, they're going to bring back Hope.
No, she's still off
Hope
in the white hot
Summers.
room, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, these eggs, though, like they required the 5 to work, right? So
no.
just the fact that you needed a freaking egg.
You think
like,
that was going to be my question at the end. Who was in this egg? Is that who you think it is? That's
who I think it is. Yes.
Hope Summers. Wow.
And they didn't highlight Hope, right? So that's the possibility that it's not her, because they never seem to be able to let these things be subtle.
But this is a panel that if it does turn out to be her, you could go back and say, oh, that's what was foreshadowed.
Yeah. Well, I would be proud of them if this is Hope Summers. I would be proud that they resisted the urge to, like, bold text the word Hope, which is how they normally handle these things. It's not subtle at all. But
now, why would Xavier want Hope Summers to be returned? Because his whole shtick now is he wants to save his space daughter. Is it because, like, Jean Grey's off in space somewhere and Hope is the other cosmic-y type person he could get to affect things to get him there?
Yeah.
Okay, I can make that story work. Yeah, if it turns out to be Hope Summers, you will win major points there, because I have no better guess than that.
I just don't know how. If it's not Hope Summers, I'm going to be pissed that this thing just hatches, right? Because we were told a long time ago that we needed the 5. Like, even if you had these eggs, they weren't independently, like, hatching into anything. I'm
trying to understand, because what we saw before, the egg would be produced by egg, gold balls, and it would immediately have all the 5 do their stuff to it, and then it would hatch right away. I mean, they would stockpile just blank eggs there for a while.
Yep.
So I was thinking this is just a blank egg that would still need to have all the stuff done to it somehow.
I agree. That's the way I view it. This is just a stock egg that was left over. It's not going to do anything on its own, right?
Or is this a special egg that has had most of the stuff already done to it, and it's already, like, kind of locked into one person in it? I don't know. Very unclear. I guess we'll find out eventually.
Yeah.
But not
I would
right
also,
now.
I mean, I kind of like, they don't do a good job playing this up very much, but I get, like, everybody thinks that Xavier betrayed them, right? But he didn't really, and he's, like, letting everybody treat him like the villain so that, the world has
kind of
a specific target.
Being the scapegoat.
Yeah. So it'd be kind of nice to get that issue resolved, right? Where it comes out finally that he didn't kill those astronauts. He didn't really murder Hope, without a purpose.
With the bad guys, yeah.
Yeah. So it could move the ball forward in a very positive way for me.
Okay, we can look forward to that for sure. But
now it's going to be somebody stupid.
Well, before that, we get another twist, right? A sudden dramatic reversal.
Yeah.
Scott wants to take Charles back to prison, but before he can do anything about that, some random masked guy appears out of nowhere, and then I guess he hits Scott in the back with, like, a stun gun.
Some kind of
stun gun taser. Scott falls down. Mystery guy and Charles disappear, like they teleport out or something. And I guess they take the egg with them. Now, Ruben, are we supposed to know who the masked guy is, or is it supposed to be a mystery?
I think it's supposed to be a mystery, but maybe it's Phantom X in, like, a really stupid looking uniform.
It looks kind of like Phantom X.
Like the mask does, but then he's never weared, like, a yellow and red bodysuit, and he's not particularly acting like Phantom X.
I have a bad guess, and my bad guess is only based on what the next chapter is of X-Manhunt. The next chapter is X-Force. So we got to get Charles and the egg into X-Force somehow.
Yeah.
So is this Forge? I mean, whatever. He uses a device to take out Scott, and using a technological device is a Forge kind of thing.
And he's got some kind of mask on to cover his identity. Yeah.
That's my only
probably
guess.
Realistic. Yeah.
So if that turns out to be right, I'll give myself a point. But again, not for any in-story reason other than just say, oh, we got to get to X-Force somehow. And at the end of X-Men, we had X-Factor appear. So maybe at the end of X-Factor, we have X-Force appear, but with a mask. Why he'd be wearing a mask now? Who knows?
I don't understand why
let's wrap this
Exceptional
issue.
X-Men aren't able to get their own tie-in.
Well, it is called a tie-in.
I know, it's collateral damage, but I'm just kind of like, it's kind of weird.
I guess
it just means that it's not going to continue the main story. Yeah.
In fact, Tom Brevoort's blog this week, just published yesterday as we record, he calls it, very specifically, he says it's more of a Red Sky tie-in. You know what that phrase means in context?
No.
It's referring back to Crisis on Infinite Earths, the original crossover, like the big crossover of all time. Because in that story, in the main story itself, the sky turns red. And all the other DC books crossed over with it. And some of them really interact with the story. And in others, it was just at the end, someone say, hey, why is the sky red? And that'd be the extent of the crossover. Yeah. So I'm guessing that's what he means. That
it'll be on TV.
Really, something like that. There'll be a news report or something of that nature. It's really going to be a straightforward, exceptional X-Men issue. But this issue, we got to wrap it up. Okay, let's see. I'm on the wrong tab. Here we are. Yeah, I was going to say really good things about the fight scenes, but that was last issue. So, here the issue felt kind of pointless. The fight scenes were here, but definitely not nearly as good as the ones in X-Men. And again, reading them back to back the way we do it, it doesn't do well with comparison. The characters aren't really acting in character. The dialogue felt awkward. And we do get some actual plot progression at the very end, but with just a mystery character with no foreshadowing at all. Comes out of nowhere. So I am giving bonus points for lack of corn dog, but other than that, I don't have a lot of positive things to say about this. I'm just going to not drone on too much more about this. Call it a 5.3 out of 10. Not a great book, and I'm ready for it to be over.
I'm going to get a 6.5.
6.5, okay. Mr. Positive today.
Yeah, Mr. Positive here. But it makes me sad because I thought the fight scenes in McKay's X-Men were just pretty cool. And I feel like the framing of what happened in this issue, if it had been written by McKay, would have been just a lot better. Like all the high level stuff, it could have happened, but just like slightly better dialogue, slightly better connectivity.
Yeah, and that fight between the brothers, that should be a really deep emotional moment. Yeah. And Mark Russell writes it like he thinks he's getting there, but I just don't think it works. So that was a miss for me. At all.
Yeah.
We're leaving X-Manhunt now and moving into our next book, which is Phoenix number 9.
Number 9.
Written by Stephanie Phillips, art by Alessandro Miracolo, colors by David Curiel, and letters by Ariana Mayer. Now, Ruben, I am running out of things to say about this book. How are we on issue 9? And we're still on this freaking Adani story. It feels like, Groundhog Day. I feel like I'm reading the same issue over and over. Jean Grey is super good, super strong. Pericus is evil and power hungry. Adani is conflicted. Yes. And that's it. Yes. Is this book selling? I guess it must be selling okay because it's not canceled. It's going to continue into a new arc after issue 10.
Yeah.
Maybe it takes a turn towards something better because I am just tired of this. Now, let's at least try to figure out what happens.
We find out that Rich Rider has a thing for Jean Grey.
That is really the plot progression here, is that when Jean Grey, who was kind of dead, but then she was in a cocoon, lots of cocoons lately, right? Cocoons all over the place. She hatches out of the cocoon, and she's got a new outfit. Hooray. This one has stars all over it. It feels almost like 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? My God, it's full of stars. She's even more powerful now, Ruben. She wasn't powerful enough when she was the Phoenix. Now she's like the Super Phoenix, whatever that even means. And we get the comedy bit where Richard Rider, the Nova, is suddenly really, really horny for Jean Grey. That's like the big plot progression here.
Yes.
Now, Phoenix is way too powerful to need allies now, so she sends Nova and Rocket off to chill on a space beach.
Yes.
Okay. Meanwhile, Adani pouts at Pericus, and then the shadow tentacles wrap around her. Her face gets all crackly. I guess it's supposed to represent Adani changing too, just like Jean does.
Yes.
But again, I don't actually see a change happening here. They seem exactly the same post-change as they did pre-change.
Yeah. I mean, that's the problem with these cosmic powers, right? They can both do anything they want and nothing. Like, I have no idea, what the limits are, and I couldn't tell you, what she could do before versus what she can do now.
Yeah, if I stood next to the 10th largest skyscraper in the world, and then I went and stood next to the largest skyscraper in the world, I couldn't tell you the difference, right? They both look so big, I can't tell the difference. And I think that's what's going on here. Like, how do I care here? Jean decides the way to lure the Shadow Realm to her is to intentionally fracture all of reality, which seems dangerous to me, a little bit risky. You know? What do I know?
Dangerous, man.
I'm not the Ultra Phoenix.
Break
I guess
reality.
she knows best.
Who cares? Ain't nothing. Just a little crack.
The plan works. Okay, it does lure Adani and the Shadow Realm to Jean. Has some pretty severe side effects. Even that safe beach planet, the sky's cracking up. And we end with an unfinished fight between Jean and Adani that includes a whole lot of talking. I think the key line here is supposed to be Adani saying, "You can't fix this. You can't fix me," sounding like a petulant teenager. And then on the last page, Adani says she's going to remake reality. The cosmic horror bits are supposed to, I guess, represent the Shadow Realm growing bigger and stronger. Mm-hmm. And then the issue ends. Now, next issue is going to end this interminable arc, thank God. And what do you think is going to happen, Ruben? Will Adani be killed? Will her heart grow 3 sizes that day and she decides that Jean wasn't so bad all along? I'm guessing that second one. That seems to be where we're going.
Yeah.
But, I'm ready to be done.
I think Adani's going to win, and going forward, it's going to be the Adani book.
She's going to take over as the Dark Phoenix Jr.
Yes. Yeah.
Get Dark Phoenix again.
No, you know what's going to happen? Jean's going to dance. She's going to do a dance she'll dance with some stars, and that'll fix everything, right?
Oh, goodness. And will Richard Rider get over his horniness?
I will give you that. The art looks cool. In my opinion, that's the only reason this book exists, is to draw like cool flames flying all over the place.
Each individual panel looks fine, better than fine, but it all blends together for me because it's not, it's not going anywhere. It's not showing anything really happening.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give this, I couldn't care less 5. That's as far as
I'm going to give it a 4. I'm actually actively against this book at this point. It's just obnoxious.
It's not good. And I know some people love this book, love this character, just want to see Jean be more and more and more powerful. Me, I think that's boring.
I also like how they have Thanos and they're like, oh yeah, I can track him now. So it's like magic hiding amulet doesn't work anymore.
I think they broke that last issue. Maybe it was shown breaking on page. I couldn't really care less.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's all we can really say about Phoenix, number 9.
Number 9?
So let's move.
It's not a number 9, it's a number 4.
I thought you were going to call it a number 2. That'll be disgusting. Oh, there we go.
Joke, right? It's a number 2.
There we go. That's the that really intellectual humor that people expect from this show.
Yes.
Okay.
We both went there, is what I love.
We did. Let's go on really now to our final book of this show, which is Hellverine number 4, The Drowning Man. Written by Ben Percy, art by Raphael Ienco, colors by Brian Valenza, letters by Travis Lanham. Now, Ruben, I know I went off on a bit of a rant last time that we did Hellverine, which was just 2 weeks ago. It's really coming back very quickly.
Yep.
I just thought it was kind of too bleak, too depressing for my tastes. And this issue doesn't really do much to make me change my mind on that.
No.
Again, it's not a badly made comic. It's just not the kind of thing I want to read. But there might be hope over the horizon because in the solicits, it says that in issue number 6, kicking off what I guess will be the second arc, the second trade paperback, we will be getting the return of Project Hellfire and the Pentangle. So that was good and goofy over-the-top stuff about demons under the Pentagon. So I'm hoping things will lighten up a little bit in May. But that's May. This is March. Today we have to deal with the issue in front of us. And this issue has a very odd structure. The first 8 pages wrap up the Japan episode, and then the next 12 pages start a whole new episode in, it's a soft G, right? Genosha? I'm never going to get that right. Go with Genosha.
Well, you could just say Gigosha now, because that's... Apparently we're going with that, which annoyed me.
I did see people online say, do you play Marvel Rivals?
I don't. I want to, but yeah, I just don't.
I saw people on Reddit complaining that in Marvel Rivals, Magneto says it with a hard G, and they're really upset about that. I thought that was kind of funny, but people are upset. But
Genosha is what he says?
Apparently in Genosha.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, in Japan, we saw that the demon plaguing that village of Jasmine Falls was a twisted version of Akihiro's mother, And I don't think it's like really her essence. It's just a demon being a jerk and taking the form of the person who died here that way, right?
Sure.
It's just using that format.
Yeah.
Now, the big problem here is that the demon has possessed all of the village's kids into fighting on its behalf. Akihiro doesn't want to, slaughter all the children to get to the demon. There's no real clever twist to solve this dilemma. The demon just attacks Akihiro directly, making her close enough for him to attack her back, and he cuts her head off. Kids go back to normal, problem solved.
Well, we have the old man samurai father who had how big would you say that spike is?
I guess
it's like a 3-foot spike through his stomach, and he just kind of pulls himself off it.
A medium-sized tree trunk, through his abdomen, and he just kind of grabs it and pulls himself forward to crawl off of it.
Yeah,
and then he's fine.
Yes, he has a conversation with his son who's possessed, and then later we see him in the hospital. I was like, apparently getting a tree trunk through your abdomen isn't really
I guess he has a secret mutant healing factor there that no one knew about.
There's got to be something, because I was like, that's a little far. Like, I don't mind like stretching my imagination, but
he should be very, very dead.
Yeah.
So he's fine, or at least he's doing fine. At the end, the village respectfully burns down Itsu's old house. Akihiro's free to move on. Even gets to take his Omamori good luck charm with him.
Yeah.
And where he goes is Genosha, which is where we're told his father once drowned him in a puddle. Again, very bleak. The editorial note says this took place in Uncanny X-Force number 34. Ruben, have you read Uncanny X-Force number 34?
No. Yeah, this is all like a period that I wasn't reading comics.
Ruben, I did go and read Uncanny X-Force number 34.
It's like an exhaustive deep dive.
Now, it's not that deep. I didn't read the issues before or after, just that one issue. And it's always kind of a wild time, right? Dipping into a random X book in an era you're not familiar with.
Yeah.
So this X-Force, Uncanny X-Force series was written by Rick Remender. It ends at issue 35.
That's a good writer.
So he's a good writer. So this is almost the end of that whole series. And yet, Logan does drown his son in a puddle. Pretty brutal.
That is brutal, yeah.
But in fairness, at the start of that issue, Akihiro tried to drown his own father in a tank of water, and it looked like Logan had drowned, but he was given CPR by Deadpool.
Oh, wow.
Who at this point in history, it was after Axis, so Deadpool had his, mind flipped and was now a pacifist. A weird time. We also have a kid version of Apocalypse, if you remember that going on. We also have a Nightcrawler hanging around who is from the Age of Apocalypse timeline. A lot of weirdness. Now, the funny thing is, just reading that issue, they don't mention Genosha They don't mention Genosha at all. It just looks like a random city, but I guess it was Genosha.
Yeah.
And again, people online are annoyed saying that, hey, Genosha should be completely depopulated. That it's supposed to be this whole, after it was, destroyed famously, no one's supposed to live there. We know Gigosha is a brand new city, and that's, at least its own thing. But this is supposed to be, it feels like this city has existed for a long time, right? It's dark, it's dingy, it's lived in. So people are saying this continuity is screwed up.
He calls it Gigosha, but that looked very technological, right?
For sure.
This, like you say, it looks like Gotham. It's very dark.
Graffiti everywhere. It looks like, what's the name of the city where Wolverina's patch hangs out? Madripoor. It looks like Madripoor to me.
Definitely looks like Madripoor. That's a good call.
But here we are, big city, lots of people, and we find out that the water is haunted. That's our new demon figure, haunted water. People keep getting killed. They get boiled by water in the bathtub. They get drowned in their beds. They drink water and it eats out through their kidneys. Nasty stuff. And there are wanted posters everywhere for somebody who looks just like Akihiro. That's unfortunate. That's inconvenient. And it turns out that the demon here, because of how Akihiro was killed, drowned in a puddle by his dad, has been taking his form using water to kill people. This demon appears in water, which that watery demon is drawn really cool. I gotta appreciate that. Akihiro steps in to fight the demon, and as the issue ends, Akihiro is engulfed by the demon's watery form, drowning again, and as he's drowning, he hears the voice of Mephisto saying, "Stop fighting me, Dakin. or I'll return you to the grave I dug you out of. So next issue is Hellverine versus Mephisto, and presumably we'll wrap up this opening arc, maybe nail down what his relationship is to Mephisto going forward. So yeah, another brutal, kind of depressing issue of Hellverine. Weird structure. It almost feels like Ben Percy expected to have another issue, right? Like he wanted an issue to wrap up Japan, and then a second issue to do Genosha, because just as an individual story, it feels like two things stuck together. Other than that, it's told very well. The art is super well suited to the story. I mean, it's detailed, it's dark, it's brutal. It's not the kind of art I enjoy looking at and going, wow, let's go in on the details of all these people with their brains coming out of the back of their heads. But I can't say it's badly done. It's just not what I want from a Hellverine story. So, listeners, if a brutal dive into Akihiro's dark backstory is what you're looking for, hey, I got the book for you. But for me, I guess I got to give it a 7 out of 10, because it's not badly done. It's just not what I want to have in my comic book diet. How about you, Ruben?
Yeah, I think a 7's fair. I'm not excited with this version of Hellverine, but it's an adequate book.
Yeah, and maybe when it changes, we'll enjoy it more. If not, we're definitely going to read through at least to the beginning of the next arc, I'd say. And if it still looks kind of depressing, and if we're still saying the same thing over and over again, we may just drop it, because why be boring? All right, that was the last book we had to talk about today. Next week, we have more X-Manhunt. We get X-Force number 9, which will be the last real chapter before the Omega issue wraps things up the following week. And yeah, I'm going to guess that Forge being the masked guy is how we get connected from X-Factor to X-Force, but we'll see if I'm correct. We also get Exceptional X-Men number 7, which is not a full chapter of X-Manhunt, just being called a tie-in. And yeah, Tom Brevoort calls it a Red Skies tie-in, so I'm guessing it'll be just really an issue of Exceptional, talking about, Mr. Sinister and how he's tricking some of these kids, and we'll get, a news flash or something in the background. We will also have 2 other issues completely unrelated to X-Manhunt, those being Magic number 3 and Psylocke number 5. Neither of those titles have really wowed us early on, but hey, hope springs eternal. Psylocke number 5 should wrap up this arc about that. He's not the taxonomist, that DC-esque villain guy. We'll see. Maybe it'll wrap up well. And also next week is Ultimate X-Men number 13, which I'll probably be talking about with Jim over on that other X-Men, or that other Marvel podcast. Ruben, does that sound like fun to you?
Yep, sounds good.
Not so enthusiastic, man. You got to dial it back a little bit. But before we get all excited about what's going on in Psylocke and Magic and everything else, what could our loyal listeners do to while away their time?
Read more X-Men comics.
You do that.
You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.
Save that for the X-Men podcast.